Medium.
Richtig. Das ist nicht roh.
Nein, das ist Medium.
Ja, das ist gut.
My final project will be further analyzing the film Fear Eats the Soul by Fassbinder. I will be arguing that in Fear Eats the Soul, Fassbinder is critiquing the human desire for social acceptance as an influence powerful enough to override personal integrity and moral consistency, illustrating how individuals, even the marginalized, participate in systems and practices of prejudice to maintain or regain social standing. To make my argument, I am organizing this video into first providing some context about Germany at the time and what influenced Fassbinder and his perspective while making this film. Then I will introduce some examples and commentary in a racial context, then in a capitalist context, and finally tie everything together on what Fassbinder was truly trying to depict in this film. So starting with the broader and historical context, I'm using first a source from Thomas L. Sayer of Fassbinder's Germany and History Identity Subject. The first era I'm going to bring up is in the 1950s and 70s, the Gastarbeiter era. This is when West Germany invited foreign workers to help rebuild the post-war economy. Many of these workers came from countries like Turkey, Italy, Greece, and especially Morocco, which is where Ali is from in the film. In the 1970s, many of these workers had settled more permanently in Germany. However, despite their economic contributions, these workers were often still excluded from German cultural life and seen as outsiders, which is seen in the beginning of the film where Ali is hanging out at a certain bar with his friends and they are surprised when a German like Emmy walks into the bar. It is also noted that in 1945, that's when the Nazi regime ended, and however, many Germans were still battling with the ideological and moral values of fascism in the 1970s. The older generation, like Emmy and her peers, were adults during the Nazi era, making their prejudice and fears, especially around race and conformity, shape their background. The film implicitly depicts the lingering authoritarian mindset and the need for order, conformity, and racial and ethnic purity that hadn't fully disappeared. The next source I'm drawing from is Alexander Klem's Nation and Representation, and he gives an in-depth analysis of the film within the socio-political landscape of West Germany in the 1970s. Clem argues that Fassbinder uses the relationship between Emmy and Ali to expose the latent racism and opportunism in German society, highlighting how individuals, even those marginalized, may perpetuate discrimination to maintain their social standing. Quote, Fassbinder's film exposes the melodrama of belonging to the neoliberal state as a migrant worker's predicament signals the emergence of a newly exploitative form of lived alienation, end quote. I also want to draw on from two of our assigned readings and how they influenced this film through Fassbinder's eyes. The first one is Brecht on Theater by John Willett, and how this shaped Fassbinder's approach in Fear Eats the Soul. By introducing Brecht's idea that theater and film should provoke critical reflection, Fassbinder uses specific performances and deliberately awkward moments to apply Brecht's alienation effect, forcing viewers to analyze the social forces, like racism and capitalism, shaping his character's behavior. Instead of inviting simple sympathy, Fassbinder presents Emmy and Ali's moral compromise as part of a larger societal contradiction, encouraging the audience to confront these uncomfortable dynamics directly. The other reading I'm drawing from is In Anarchy of the Imagination, where Fassbinder explains his belief that film should reveal the hidden power structures shaping everyday life and expose how people participate in their own oppression. This perspective deeply informs Fear Eats the Soul, where Fassbinder shows how characters like Emmy compromise their integrity for social acceptance, revealing how individuals both suffer under and reinforce systems of racism, capitalism, and exploitation. Rather than offering easy solutions, Fassbinder uses his films to lay bare these contradictions, trusting the audience to contemplate with their own complexity. Moving on to my argument in a racial context, I want to point out two scenes. The first one being when Emmy mentions her ex-husband to Ali, and the second scene I will be showing is when Emmy forgives past injustices of her son because she wanted to be accepted. These two scenes speak to how racism, is not a fixed or unchangeable moral stance, but rather as a social tool that people use or discard depending on what secures their own standing in the community. Fassbinder shows that for many characters, prejudice is less about deep personal conviction and more about maintaining social power.
In der Partei, beim Hitler. Wissen Sie, wer das war, Hitler?
Hitler, ja?
Ich war auch in der Partei. Eigentlich alle. Oder fast alle. Aber ich bin trotzdem gut ausgekommen mit František. So hat er geheißen, mein Mann, František.
In this scene, Emmy tells Ali about her deceased husband, a man she admits was in the Nazi Party. She does so casually, almost nostalgically, and this moment reveals how her past allegiance to an oppressive system has been excused because it aligned her with the dominant social order. It's not her personal moral reckoning that shapes her current actions, but her desire to be accepted in the life she has now.
Mama, ab 1. da fängt die Hildegard an beim Schau, ja?
Natürlich, Bruno. Ich war doch immer für euch da.
Danke, Mama, danke.
In this later scene, when Emmy's son, who initially judged her for marrying Ali, begins to show her kindness again because he wants Emmy to babysit his son, or provide him some free labor. Emmy quickly, though, forgives him, and she welcomes his acceptance not because he has genuinely changed, but because this approval restores her sense of belonging. Fassbinder uses this to show that Emmy, like many people, prioritized social validation over moral consistency. She overlooks the injustice and hypocrisy of those around her as soon as they reintegrate her into the community. It's also important to note that she tells Ali after that he needs to adopt to the German culture, when she denied him couscous, which is her conforming after she has been accepted again. These two scenes show that racism in the film functions less as an absolute evil and more as a flexible social dynamic power, one that individuals and groups manipulate to maintain their place in the social hierarchy. Moving on to the capitalist context, I want to focus again on two scenes. The first one being when the maids discriminate against the new maid, and the second being when the store manager returns to accepting Emmy because he needs and enjoys her business. Fassbinder shows that capitalist opportunism often overrides moral belief, allowing prejudice to be set aside when there is financial or personal gain in these two scenes.
Ich kann mir das sonst gar nicht anders vorstellen. Guck mal. Hör zu.
This dynamic is clearest in the behavior of the maids and Emmy's employer. Early in the film, the Bosnian women, themselves marginalized as foreign workers, discriminate against the new maid because of her background, eager to protect their own fragile social position. Their bias isn't rooted in deep immoral belief, but in a desire to hold on to what little status they have, showing how even the marginalized adopt exclusionary practices when it benefits them.
Grüß Ihnen, Frau Kurowski. Na, sind's wieder zurück aus dem Urlaub? Haben Sie ein schönes Wetter gehabt?
Ja, es war sehr schön.
Ja, wir müssten auch wieder mal Urlaub machen. Wo waren's denn?
Nicht weit am Steinsee.
Am Steinsee, ja. Den kenne ich auch. Schönes Fleckerl Erde. Komm es doch rein. Erzählen Sie uns ein bisschen was.
Similarly, the store manager, who had previously shunned Emmy due to her marriage to Ali, begins treating her kindly again once he realizes she brings valuable business. Here, capitalist incentives erase prior prejudice. What matters is not moral consistency, but profit. Fassbinder suggests that under capitalism, relationships are transactional, and the pursuit of economic or social advantage easily overrides ethical principles.
Komm mal her. Mach mal. Fass dir mal an. Toll. Und die Haut ist so zart.
Fassbinder presents capitalism and racism not as absolute systems, but as subjective, shifting structures that individuals manipulate to secure social acceptance, even at the cost of their own moral integrity. Racism divides characters along lines of ethnicity and nationality, and capitalism creates transactional openings where prejudice can be temporarily suspended, not because people have overcome their biases, but because they see personal or material gain in doing so. This dynamic is painfully evident in this scene where Emmy allows the other maids to objectify Ali's body, treating him as an exotic spectacle rather than as her partner. For a brief moment, Emmy regains the social approval she had lost by marrying Ali, but only by participating in the very system of exploitation and dehumanization that had marginalized them both. Fassbinder shows how Emmy's desire for reintegration into her social world leads her to compromise her personal integrity, prioritizing acceptance over genuine solidarity with Ali. In conclusion, the film critiques how capitalism and racism are not just external systems, but tools that individuals, even the marginalized, actively navigate and reinforce to maintain their positions of relative power. Social belonging becomes a currency, and the cost is often the betrayal of moral consistency.